Let's talk a little about Dr. Jordan Peterson. One of the motivations for an upload of this kind is I find that there are a handful of progressive channels on YouTube that try to discuss Dr. Peterson, but you can really tell that these guys who do that have not spent a lot of time with his work. Maybe they've seen a handful of video clips, but they also greatly misrepresent everything that he has to say. And, there's a very big difference between, just watching a 3 to 5 minute segment of something and just trying to take notes so they can slant things to get a desired result, and people who have actually, been through his lectures, and I'm sure you have seen a lot of lectures too, whoever you are, because he has, so many online, and just people in the audience have this enormous, massive amounts of material from Dr. Peterson. I took his Maps of Meaning course, on YouTube completely, everything that he mentioned in that one. And, he also just has a lot of things cut up into segments for the Essential Truth channel, and also some of his debates as well are just everywhere, especially the stuff with Sam Harris was a recent topic of fascination, and I did one upload on that. Let's get into Jordan Peterson. What is this guy all about? Is he real or is he fake? Does he have anything to say at all that's, of value? Or is he just completely overrated? And is he kind of a superficial intellectual? What really is he all about? I say that the absolute largest thing that I like about Jordan Peterson is something that I've never heard a single person ever say. And that's when he talks about parenting and raising children. You ever heard that stuff? When he talks about, how, you socialize a kid in this environment, how it can predict success for them later on. If, the parents give the kids a lot of rough and tumble play, then they can learn, the limits of what can hurt them and what can't. And also about, it teaches them not to be afraid of things. So once they go to school, they're, more outgoing. They're it's easier for them to make friendships, and they don't cry all the time. And he has a lot of things to say about parenting and raising children. And for me, some guy like me who doesn't have kids, this is the first time I've ever heard any of that stuff. So it was, I've never once heard anybody who ever talk about Jordan Peterson's comments on parenting and raising children, but that's the stuff that I like the absolute most. When it comes to his stuff on religion, now this is a big one. What do we really make of that? What do we do with Maps of Meaning? The first thing that I would say is that one other YouTuber out there, even forget the guy's name, but he gave sort of a genuine take when he's like, Peterson has some very experimental things in his, psychological platform. When he's teaching psychology, there are things in psychology that are based on hard science, like neuropsychology and the cognitive psychological elements that are really based on brain functions and, neurology. But, Peterson completely combines things like experimental Jungian psychology and science-based neuropsychology. And he'll act like they're on par with each other. But the stuff that Carl Jung inspired him to have is not completely accepted by all scholars, especially when he talks about, things like the existence of God and things like what religion is. That's not settled among scholars even. So he presents it like, it's purely established fact to his students. Okay, I accept that that's a genuine criticism. Overall, I can't say I agree with Peterson 100% about religion. I'm sure you don't either. If you have actually been able to decipher what on earth he's talking about, and that was another genuine criticism of Jordan Peterson. When you ask him, a simple question, he talks for 20 minutes. Sam Harris made that comment about him. But somebody else pointed out once, just in the comments section on YouTube, it was like, do you ever notice when they ask Jordan Peterson a question, he often ignores it, and then he replies with his own question? If they were to ask him, Jordan, do you believe in God? He would say, well, a better question is, why would someone believe in God in the first place? Or, Something to that effect. And, he does that a lot. He also did it again with that famous example. It's not why would any woman want to be a CEO. The question is, why would any man want to be a CEO in the first place? He does that quite frequently. And that person who wrote that comment actually followed up by saying, he's very good at explaining that stuff. He's very good at, asking his own question and then giving a good answer to it. And it kind of almost works, but at the same time, he avoids a lot of challenges and a lot of challenged questions. And he does dodge a lot of things when it comes to religion, but in my previous upload on Peterson and Harris, I talked about how I think the reasons why he doesn't answer the questions about religion directly is he doesn't want to shock anyone and scare them away from his work. He actually wants to slowly invite people in so they will read Maps of Meaning and they will listen to his lectures on YouTube and they'll make sort of a genuine attempt to understand his platform. Because if you just sort of hear something like Brett Weinstein try to throw at him when he's like one of those Kathy Newman lines, almost like, so you're saying that God is just a metaphor for these particular types of stories? If you were just to say that that's what he thinks God is, no one would accept that. I don't accept that. No, I don't think God is, just a metaphor for these particular types of stories. I mean, I don't think many people would ever agree to that if you just said it out like that. But one of the absolute most critical things that I could say is, for a long time, Jordan Peterson told people to study Jesus Christ, to learn about Christ. He wanted people to, he really tried to promote the image of Christ to his students, to people at his talks and lectures. And, he said it's a good thing, right? Well, if he's going to do that, he probably should have stated that he doesn't actually believe that Jesus rose from the dead. I mean, he said he is agnostic on the issue, right? So, he probably should have kind of prefaced that he is not actually a practicing Christian in that sense. He doesn't actually believe Jesus rose from the dead. That's kind of important. He really should have stated, that, hey, you should kind of learn about the teachings of Jesus as opposed to just, saying a statement like study Christ. If he's not a practicing Christian, which I don't think he is for a second, labels aside, I don't think he is for a second. He has his own sort of religious belief and spirituality. He has his own spirituality. We can say that much. I think it's kind of unfair to present it that way to his students and to all of the people in this fan base, because it's like, it's kind of misleading. And it's also sort of like, if you think that you are so educated and you are so much more intelligent than the masses, that you can live your life without being a Christian, but you think that the masses need Christianity to stay in order, I don't accept that for a second. And I think very few people in his fan base actually would when you put it out like that. Okay, if you want to look at, Jesus as a story and try and get some examples of good moral character. I'm just giving examples. I'm not a Christian, by the way. It's just like, but if you were just to say something like that, maybe you would be able to pass it off in a more acceptable way. But to tell people that really they need to study Jesus Christ, but you're not a Christian yourself and you don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead, I think that's a little bit much, and he probably shouldn't have done that, in terms of a genuine thing to do. Well, let's move on from religion, because we can talk about that for now until the end of time. Jordan Peterson also was really big on, free speech. He also had his entire thing that associated with his political platform. What was all that about? Does he actually care about that stuff? Well, he did make that comment on Joe Rogan that he found out how to monetize social justice warriors, and it's like, that kind of gives me the impression, and it gave a lot of people the impression, that he is someone who kind of devised a plan about how to get famous on the internet. And he talked about this when I was taking his Maps of Meaning course, about how he watches the YouTube statistics very closely. He was ahead of his time, actually. He recorded every lecture he did, since, 1991 or something, on video. And he was, storing all the videos. And definitely ahead of his time when it comes to things like that. So, I mean, that's some good thinking. And, even the people that don't like Peterson say that he has a fair amount of intelligence. And, it's like he sort of thought about a way that he can get famous on the internet, okay? I don't think that's even a controversial thing to say. It's like Peterson is a guy who wrote a book called Maps of Meaning, didn't get a lot of attention, and then he was just like, wait a second, there's a way that I can genuinely get famous, and I can do it through using the internet. And, he did just that, and he has been referred to as possibly the most, the most prolific public intellectual in the world or something like that. People line up for hours, waiting for hours, to hear Jordan Peterson talk. And one thing that I did like about Peterson, though, was the lobster, actually. Like the way he talks about dominance hierarchies and just even lobsters sort themselves out into dominance hierarchies, and the human beings, in evolution, that lobsters are even older than trees. That means dominance hierarchies are older than trees. So you can't blame it on patriarchy. This is just kind of what human beings do. And, that's kind of an insightful statement. So overall, though, I would say Jordan Peterson has a very large blend of very insightful statements, very good ideas, and then other things that are blended in to increase his popularity, and also some very experimental things that aren't quite settled yet. And, we talked about some of those associated with religion, but one of the largest people that inspired Jordan Peterson was Carl Jung, and I found Carl Jung to be very, very clear about things. So I guess I can say another positive thing about Peterson. He talked a lot about Carl Jung, and that actually inspired me to, look more into this guy and what is he all about. But Carl Jung was very direct. They asked Carl Jung a question, he answers it easily. They asked Carl Jung, do you believe in God? And he said, it's not that I believe, I know. I mean, he's pretty straightforward about what he was thinking. And, Jordan Peterson has some very large things to say about belief systems, like some very bold things. I mean, I was listening to him when he was on The Agenda with Steve Piken, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, and he said, every person has a belief system because nobody has absolute knowledge. And at the bottom of your knowledge pool, then you have to use faith. I mean, any person who has a functioning brain has a belief system, they have faith, and at the zenith of your belief system, that's God. I mean, that's a very bold statement. That's a very, challenging statement too, because that challenges a lot of things about Christianity or Islam or Judaism, or even other things, such as maybe things like paganism are also challenged. Lots of religions would not exactly know how to respond to that. And what I think Peterson is trying to say is that people all have, this one definition of truth that draws people toward goodness. You just interpret it in different ways, and that gives us things like stories and, ways people can express this idea that are culturally relative, but they're all going back toward the same truth of moral goodness. That was a very, very direct question from him, and that's one of the few times, it's not a question, it's a response. That is one of the few times he gave a very solid answer. That was at the tail end of his long podcast with Sam Harris when they talked about truth, when he was just like, the truth leads you to morality. That's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, that's some very thoughtful stuff, but, it's like, we don't really know if Jordan Peterson is correct. Because once again, as I mentioned, he does blend in things that are designed to enhance his own internet popularity, and also just designed to kind of provoke. He's definitely a bit of a provocateur. When he talks about politics, it's very nice to hear about the things in the human brain and how they function, and, just saying that liberals have a much higher trait in openness, conservatives have a much higher traits of conscientiousness, so we need liberals to come up with ideas, but we need conservatives to actually implement them and put them into the working order. I mean, just hearing that word conscientious so often, I mean, that is another benefit to really learn about, what you kind of do with the workplace. And I've talked about it before on these recordings, like, 12 rules for life. Like, the majority of that stuff, to me, it just sort of seems like is, teaching people conscientiousness. It's like, you know, clean your room, make your bed, make a schedule. All of those things are trying to instill conscientiousness into mostly young men, but people, anyone can read it, right? And that is just because conscientiousness predicts success in the workplace. All right. I mean, like, I'm all on board for that. Now, does Jordan Peterson actually care about, some of the things that he talks about politically? Does he actually hate socialism? Does he actually hate communism? I think those things are probably not as pressing for him. I mean, I definitely think that he has some things to say about it, and he's raised some genuine criticisms. What I think he cares more about politically, and this is only totally just an interpretation of what I've seen from his lectures, is he's building his own political career, and that's what he wants to do. I think there's a high chance he might get involved with something on the political scene. He's made a comment once about how he wants to be prime minister. I don't know if that will ever happen, but definitely to be more involved in the political process, definitely to be more involved in increasing his own political power in some way, and probably some governmental position. I think he definitely puts that more importantly than his statements on, hating Chairman Mao and socialism and communism. Okay, I mean, socialism sucks. Oof. A lot of people say that out there. I mean, one of the nice things, though, and this is not exactly a nice thing, he is saying that, protesters put the hammer and sickle on their sign when they're talking about things that are associated, with anything associated with communism or socialism, and he's like, that should be equated with the Nazi swastika, because of all the people that died because of, communism. I mean, like hundreds of millions, all of the people, really suffered because of that, and that should be something that is equated with the Nazi swastika in terms of how evil we view it. Now, when it comes to Jordan Peterson, I had seen a couple of his lectures, and the first time I ever saw a lecture from him, I thought, okay, this guy is making up stuff to cater to a racist audience. That was my first impact of him, because he was talking about anti-diversity stuff. Then I started to listen a little more, and I was like, wait a second. Maybe he's not really like that. I mean, he doesn't sound, like batshit crazy in all of them. It took me a while after listening to a few of his lectures to even know that he was a psychologist, because I'm too lazy for Wikipedia. But I was like, I just got the vibe that he was kind of slanting things to cater to a particular audience. I don't think he's catering to racists. I will say that. What it sounds like, I don't think he's catering to racists. I mean, he's a guy who says that Ashkenazi Jews have an IQ that's 10 to 15 points higher than the international average. I mean, if you're going to cater to racist people, you probably leave stuff like that out. I think he's probably just catering toward a male audience, which he definitely kind of openly admits. He's like, he says, he studied the statistics of how people are watching his videos, and he's trying to figure out what people are watching and how they're responding to it. And yes, he wanted to get famous. Yes, he wanted more money, and probably one day he will try to do something associated with political power. So this is how he went about it. He found out a way that he could do it. And also, he probably views social justice warriors as whiny little brats. I mean, once again, a lot of people say that. That's not exclusive to him. That's not even a controversial thing to say anymore. But, the real reason that I got kind of, hooked into watching his things regularly is, the Cathy Newman debate. I had seen, a couple lectures, but it was like, once I saw him with Cathy Newman, I had to watch that thing 3 times. The first time it was just because she kept saying, the so you're saying. I was like, I couldn't quite comprehend what Jordan's platform was, because she kept putting words in his mouth, and then, he was like, no, that's not what I'm saying. So I had to watch it, a whole second time just to get what that was. Then, of course, I watched it a third time to see kind of, after those people had been discussing how to win an argument, I was like, what is he really doing? Well, how do you sort of stay calm and collected under an argument? during an argument to learn a little more about that. And I think that's one of those things that really just kind of took him to the next level and really got spread around all through the intellectual dark web. Now, I think Jordan Peterson has talked a little bit about libertarianism in just the smallest way. I don't think he actually likes libertarians. He said they're low in conscientiousness, and then on the other hand, he endorses some things in their platform, and if they're low in conscientiousness, according to him, I don't think he could actually like them. That's one just kind of an odd remark that he made once. But the stuff that Peterson said with Cathy Newman about the gender pay gap, that stuff isn't new. That stuff has been going on longer than I've been alive. In my 30s. I mean, I'm in my 30s, and I was listening to a debate with Thomas Sowell back from 1981 talking about the gender pay gap, and that's the exact same stuff. I mean, it's the exact same arguments that have been rehashed over and over again. A couple years ago, Larry Elder wrote a book, and he had one chapter in the book. I forget the title of the book, but the chapter was called Cracks in the Glass Ceiling, which is the exact same stuff that Jordan Peterson and Cathy Newman talked about. It's like these things are not new. These things are not, that's not anything new. I mean, people have been saying that stuff longer than I've been alive. I mean, 30, 40, maybe even 50 years people have been addressing this stuff. That's all there is to say about that. It's like, I mean, if that propels him to stardom, good luck for him, but that's not really any sort of original invention. One of the things that people absolutely like the most about Jordan Peterson is that he gives good explanations about why we like stories. He sort of can explain to you the psychology about why people are attracted to certain types of stories, why you like this particular character, what, archetypes, that whole discussion, and like how this, character does actions in the story that sort of create a kind of model image for society. And I think that maybe if there is any genuine nature to Jordan Peterson's platform, which once again, I think there's a little bit. I mean, I think, as I said, he has genuine things he believes, and he blends it with things to propel him to internet stardom. It's a blend of things. But I think he does actually try to present a plan for how society should function better. And, it comes from a lot of things. It comes from a belief system. It comes from, believing in a principle of morality and goodness. It comes from, just learning about, the way stories function. People are attracted to these qualities. And also, as a psychologist who's taught things like assertiveness training, how to succeed in the workplace, how to achieve in the workplace. So just to recap a little bit about, a critique of Jordan Peterson, this was my attempt to give the most honest critique and evaluation of his work. I would say that he does not differentiate between the experimental psychology and the science-based psychology, although, I mean, it's probably because he genuinely believes it's all on the same level, but the scholars have not agreed upon that yet. He told people to believe in Jesus or to study the teachings of Christ, rather, when he doesn't believe that Jesus rose from the dead. The stuff about the gender pay gap is not really new. It's just kind of a rehashing of old points that have been said for the last 30 to 40 years. For some positive things, I really liked what he had to say about parenting. I really liked what he had to say about, taking care of children. I thought that, I thought that he did a very good job about telling people about conscientiousness and how they can succeed in the workplace. And the last thing to say, the last point that I guess I was trying to make was, he has a blend of things that he genuinely believes and things that are there to sort of provoke and incite a reaction to propel them to internet stardom. I would say that Jordan Peterson's rise to internet stardom is very, very calculated. Bill C-16, he knew exactly what he was doing. And on a previous upload, I even mentioned that I was like, did he just sit around one day and sort of start to think, what will make me famous on the internet? Oh, wait, I have an idea. Yeah, I do think that, absolutely. Almost 100%. I mean, I'm not certain, but almost 100%. He just sat around one day and he devised a plan, which actually did work, so it's somewhat clever, about how to get famous on the internet and how to get famous on YouTube and throughout the entire world. Well, I mean, it worked. Well, what do you think, though? Do you have anything to say at all? Do you have any genuine criticisms about Jordan Peterson? Do you have any challenges that you would like to make to anything that I've said? Thank you so much if you've made it to the end of this recording. Thank you for listening to this podcast. But yeah, if you really have anything that you want to challenge me on, drop a comment below. And what do you think about Peterson's work? Do you like him or dislike him? Do you agree with something or disagree with something that he has said in the past? If you have anything to say at all, please drop a comment below, and until next time.